Well, good evening. My name is Fyodor. I'm one of the founders and active participants of the Russian branch of the Russian Internet Society. And before we start talking about the technical specialists and technical standards and role of the Russian standards in its development, I think it makes sense to mention briefly what ISOC does in the world and why technical standards are important for us. ISOC as an organization was founded more than 20 years ago, and during all this time it's been actively working with the projects for the internet development, and there are some directions which are especially meaningful, and these are technologies about which we're going to talk about, and the development of the policies, the internet management as well, and of course educational projects connected with the internet. ISOC in Russia, the Russian branch of ISOC was organized and recognized internationally, international organization in 2013, and the project's real business started closer to the end of 2014, and they are continuing this year as well. What I want to tell you is the first project of the ISOC Russian branch, and I think that there will be follow-up next projects, and I think that today we'll be able to discuss some other development next steps about the projects which we are implementing now. And this project is technological. This is a localization of the IETF journal, and it's a translation of its English version into Russian language, with the final goal to involve more Russian specialists to work with the IETF. IETF yesterday was mentioned many times yesterday, so I will be very brief with my introduction. Its abbreviation is deciphered as the Engineering Council of the Internet, although it's not actually council in the vocabulary and dictionary meaning of this word. It's just a group of technical specialists which represent the hardware manufacturers, researchers, and just people who are active in the area of developing technologies and standards. And the main task is to develop standards. And as a mission, they have this slogan that the community strives to make internet better and make it better from the technical viewpoint. And we're striving to be open with low entrance barriers to avoid business entrance and to stay away from politics. Well, it's clear that the main communication channel and discussion, of course, is the lists of mailing lists and our actual meetings on which our participants meet on all corners of the world, and these meetings are being held 3 times a year. So this is briefly introduction. So the question is where the Russian specialists are. So the question is just look at the statistics of the recent meetings of the IETF community. Well, yes, to some extent, probably the last meeting wasn't really indicative because it was in the United States. It's quite far place geographically, but we have 1,100 participants from 50 countries. We did find 2 participants from Russia, and I think it's not actually reflect the importance of Russian technological process of the internet development.
At the same time, we can see significant share of American participants. That would be clear because internet was born in the United States, and they were engaged into the discussion even already in the early times, and we can see good shares of China and European states, countries, and we believe there is a very good potential for development and more active engagement of our technical specialists into the community work. Talking about the motivation, whether it's worthwhile, we should be engaging the work of IETF. I would say that this is a volunteer activity. People are not receiving material reward for their activity, thus there wouldn't be universal answers for why, because everyone develops that motivation independently. Overall, I would say that's kind of clear. That's a community of people who believe into the bright future of the internet in technological sense, and they are trying to improve internet, which is a work for the benefit of all of the network users. For some, it is the need to get more knowledge. For others are ready to share their knowledge they have. For some, it is the contacts, interaction, and for some, it is being part of the project, which is very important for the future of the internet overall. Talking about what is missing, what the Russian specialists miss. And that's an open question, open-ended question. I don't insist that I cannot state that we have conducted some research and we are qualified to be saying that this is exactly what's missing. I think that competency, even though I put it in the first line, is obviously not the main element missing. At the same time, if you have motivation, you have and for interest and information, you can already engage and work, and that's something you'd like to concentrate. Of course, we can't keep on talking about the volunteering in Russia. Its role in Russia is probably not so important as the role of volunteering in the United States and Western Europe, and that's not only true for IT, but overall, as it seems to us, some more information about the work of IETF, and not just about what exists and what kind of technological trends are there, but also how simple it is to engage in the work of IETF individually is very much desired, which is why our first project, IETF Community, is on top of the conferences that it conducts 3 times a year. It publishes a digest, something that's taking place that is being published closer to the next meeting, which is an overview of what has been discussed over the previous meeting, what new working teams came into being, what was discussed, what are the plans, just to be able to keep track. It was published only in English until recently and was available as an electronic version. You can come on the website and get a PDF of it. It was distributed over subscription. I was unable to get it in Russia, but you could show your address, and some probably were able to get a paper copy. Now, the project I want to inform you is the localization of IETF magazine, journal. Our idea was to make IETF more visible in Russia. And with the help of the Internet's European Internet Support Fund and ISOC European Regional Fund, we managed to start the process. So how did it happen? At first sight, it seemed to me that this would be rather a small, a rather timid, small step. And we wanted the Russian ISOC to have some activity with visible results, and localization of content seemed to be a good beginning. But in the framework of non-profit and the situation that we had turned out to be not that simple, even in this case, that was in the details. On one hand, that is the very big number of reliable ideas in Russian ISOC. At the same time, a very small segment, a very small number of those who are ready to spend their time not just on discussion of ideas, but on the implementation. And some other things that we have encountered, challenges that we encountered in the process of localization. something I liked very much. For example, yesterday, we were talking about the working groups. One was related to content, a challenge that was not so evident. It was not evident to me before we started working on the localization of IETF magazine. The issue was terminology. Oh, it's evident that it's clear that IETF activity is very, very active. Some trends are coming into community very quickly. Some of them are known. Russian speakers are using English-speaking equivalents, and they believe that this is the solely correct option, because when they are encountering the possible efforts to translate some things into Russian, they think that it's inappropriate, not established terminology yet, but at the same time we need to understand that it will take some time for the Russian community to get standard established terminology. And thus, that kind of community engagement interaction will be very effective for the development of, for improving the quality of localization of the magazine. Well, what do we have as a result? Despite the challenges that we had, the project is launched. As of today, we have already two issues published. If the first one was having catching up aspect was published at the end of January. At the same time, it was actually the end of November 2014 Digest translation or localization. The issue in March was published much more rapidly. We have organized the direct interaction with IETF magazine. Thus, in 2 weeks' time, after it was published in the United States, it was available to Russian readers. Today, it is available in the PDF format at isocru.org. The participants of the event in Moscow are IGF 15 had accessed in a printed version. I brought some 100 copies here to Kazan. If you didn't pay attention, on the table on the right upon the exit from this audience, and I have some more copies myself. Those are out. So as Yari Arko has assessed valued very much this publication. He said, of course, English is a lingua franca, but it's much easier and nicer to discuss the latest developments in your native tongue. Of course, localization of the magazine is not a purpose per se. The purpose is to increasing the audience, the reader audience, and that could be a good point to start with during the IETF meetings to understand things, whether what we are working on is matching your interests and speed up the process of your integration. I saw colleagues here have drawn my attention to IETF fellowship program, a possibility of also for Russian participants to go to IETF meeting and their travel as well as stay costs will be compensated and they would get access. At the same time, colleagues are saying that Russian technical experts are not using that opportunity very much. Talking about the magazine, of course, we would be working on increasing the number of the sites where it's available with the relevant audience. At some point, we might reach a higher level of localization where we would have not only translated but also locally generated content. And I would like to invite all participants of the conference and the community overall to engage actively at the work of IETF and the work of the Russian ISOC. And talking about the work of IETF, you can start getting familiar with the magazine to understand what's going on, what is of interest to you. Later on, possibly subscribing to mailing lists, and then later on, possibly applying for IETF fellowship. You see my contacts on the slide. I will be ready to answer any questions and discuss any kind of ideas about cooperation. Thank you very much. A wonderful initiative. Unfortunately, we are very much behind the schedule. Thus, I believe the questions should better be moved on to a later point.